Waitress was fired for serving Vampire King. What happens next is shocking. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Mia had always been a humble soul, working tirelessly as a waitress in a high-end restaurant in downtown Manhattan. Her life was a constant hustle, moving from one shift to the next, with barely enough time to eat or sleep. But Mia never complained. She was used to it, used to the cold stares of the wealthy patrons, used to the pressure of keeping everything running smoothly while barely scraping by. She didn't mind the exhaustion until tonight. Tonight, everything was about to change. Mia had served hundreds of customers, but this customer was different. She had been told that a VIP guest was arriving, but she didn't know the specifics. When she entered the VIP section, she immediately noticed a tall man sitting alone at a corner table, his piercing gaze fixed on the menu in front of him. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his dark hair swept back, and his features sharp and handsome in a way that didn't feel quite human. There was something about him that made the air feel colder, something she couldn't quite place. She approached the table with her usual professionalism, but as she got closer, the room seemed to freeze. She couldn't explain it, but the tension in the air made her skin prickle. She forced a smile and asked, "Good evening, sir. Can I start you with something to drink?" He looked up, his eyes glowing a strange shade of amber, and for a moment, Mia felt as though time itself had stopped. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he just stared at her, his gaze so intense that it made her heart skip a beat. Finally, he spoke, his voice smooth and low. "I'll have a glass of red wine. The best you have." Mia nodded, trying to shake the feeling that something was off. She quickly went to fetch the wine, but when she returned, disaster struck. As she set the glass on the table, she accidentally knocked it over, spilling the rich red liquid all over the man's suit. A rush of panic flooded Mia's chest. She had heard of this man, but never in her wildest dreams did she think she would be serving him. He was Adrian Black, the CEO of one of the most powerful companies in the world. His reputation for being ruthless was legendary, but he was also known to be different. Rumors swirled about his strange habits and his secretive life, but Mia had always dismissed them as just gossip. But now, in this moment, she realized the rumors were true. Adrian didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his next move. Mia's mind raced. She quickly grabbed a napkin, desperately trying to clean up the mess she had made. "I'm so sorry, sir," she stammered, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean to. Let me fix this." Adrian's gaze softened for just a moment, and to Mia's surprise, he stood up and motioned for her to stop. "It's fine," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Don't worry about it. This kind of thing happens." Mia froze. This wasn't how she had expected things to go. She had been bracing for a confrontation, but instead, Adrian seemed calm, almost amused. But the calmness didn't last long. Moments later, her manager, Mrs. Henderson, appeared from behind the curtain, her face livid with anger. Without a word, she marched over to Mia and grabbed her arm. "That's enough," she hissed, her grip tightening. "You've ruined this event. You're fired. Now, pack your things and go." Mia stood there in shock, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't believe it. Fired, just like that. In front of Adrian Black, the man she had just spilled wine on. The same man who was watching her now, his gaze heavy and intense. Mia felt like the ground beneath her was shifting, like her entire life was crumbling in that one moment. Mrs. Henderson didn't give her a chance to explain. She just dragged her toward the door, and as Mia looked back, she caught Adrian's eyes once more. This time, he didn't look angry. He didn't look disappointed. He just looked intrigued. And that, in itself, sent a chill down Mia's spine. What had just happened? I thought my life was over. Fired in front of everyone. Humiliated, with no way to fix it. As I walked down the darkened street, the rain pounding against the pavement, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. I had lost my job, my source of income, and I had no idea how I was going to explain this to my family. My mind raced, trying to think of what to do next. I wasn't sure where I was going, but the sound of footsteps behind me made me tense up. I didn't want to look back. I just wanted to disappear. But the footsteps got closer. I quickened my pace, but the figure behind me did the same. Then, just as I was about to reach the corner of the street, a familiar voice called out my name. Mia. I froze. It was Adrian, the Vampire King. How could he be here? Why was he following me? I turned slowly to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. He was standing there, tall and imposing, under the glow of a nearby street lamp. His eyes glinted with that same strange amber hue, and I could feel his presence like a heavy weight in the air. You're not leaving, are you? He asked, his voice smooth, almost teasing. I couldn't speak. What was I supposed to say? I had no job, no money, and no idea what to do next. But somehow, Adrian seemed to have an answer. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. I'm not here to make you feel uncomfortable, Mia, he said softly. But you can't just walk away from everything like this. I opened my mouth to protest, but he raised a hand to stop me. I saw what happened back there. You didn't deserve to be fired. It was a mistake, and it wasn't your fault. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Adrian Black, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar empire, the Vampire King, was standing in front of me, saying that it wasn't my fault? My mind was spinning. I don't know what to do. I whispered, my voice shaking. I have no money. No job. I can't go back to that place. Adrian's expression softened, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw a glimpse of something human in his eyes. You don't have to go back there, he said quietly. You don't have to worry about money, either. I can help you. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I didn't know what he meant by help, but part of me knew I couldn't turn him down. Part of me felt like he was offering me a lifeline, and I didn't want to let it slip away. Why? I asked, my voice barely audible. Adrian took another step forward, his gaze never leaving mine. Because you're different, Mia. You're not like everyone else. You didn't just serve me because you had to. You treated me with respect. And that's something I don't see often. His words struck a chord deep inside me, and for a moment, I felt like everything was going to be okay. But then the doubt crept in. But what do you want from me? I asked, my voice trembling. Adrian smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a chill down my spine. Nothing, Mia. Not right now. I just want to give you a chance. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to me. Call me when you're ready. I can offer you a position in my company. A much better one than you had at that restaurant. I took the card, my fingers brushing his for just a second. The contact sent a strange sensation through my body, like an electric current. I stared at the card in my hand, not sure what to do with it. I had no idea what Adrian was offering, but I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward him. I don't know what to say, I whispered, still in shock. You don't have to say anything, Adrian replied, his voice low. Just think about it. And don't let your past define your future. You deserve more than what you've been given. He turned to leave, but before he did, he looked over his shoulder at me one last time. I'll be waiting for your call, Mia. And with that, he disappeared into the night, leaving me standing there, torn between the life I had known and the mysterious offer from the Vampire King. The rain continued to fall, but it no longer felt like a burden. Somehow, I felt a spark of hope. But what did it mean? What would this new opportunity bring? Would I be walking into a world of danger, or would I find something I had never dared to dream of? I stood there in the rain, Adrian's business card burning a hole in my hand. His words echoed in my mind, but I was lost, unsure what to make of it. I had no idea what this mysterious man wanted from me, and I had no clue what kind of world I might be stepping into. But one thing was clear, my life was already falling apart, and maybe, just maybe, this offer could be the escape I needed. I had spent too long living paycheck to paycheck, working my fingers to the bone, only to be discarded like nothing. Could this really be my chance to change everything? I knew deep down that I couldn't keep going the way I had been. So, with a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang twice before a deep, smooth voice answered. Mia, Adrian said, his tone as calm and confident as ever. I knew you'd call. My heart raced as I tried to gather my thoughts. I don't know what to say. I stammered. I'm not sure what this is all about. There was a brief pause on the other end, and then Adrian spoke again, his voice softening, but still with an underlying strength. You don't need to know everything right away. Just come to my office. We'll talk, and I'll explain everything. Don't worry, Mia. I'll take care of you. I was silent for a moment. Okay. I finally replied, still unsure of what I was getting into. But the promise of something better than my current life made me feel like I had no choice but to take that step. The next morning, I found myself standing outside the towering glass building where Adrian worked. It was nothing like I had ever imagined, a place of unimaginable wealth, power, and influence. I stood in front of the massive doors, unsure whether I should walk through them or turn and run. But something inside me pushed me forward. I had already come this far. The lobby was just as grand as the outside, with high ceilings and polished marble floors. The walls were adorned with modern art, and the whole place had an air of elegance that felt both intimidating and mesmerizing. A receptionist greeted me with a polite smile and asked if I had an appointment. "I'm here to see Adrian Black," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's expecting me." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, but her smile never wavered. "Of course. Please, have a seat. I'll let him know you're here." I nodded and took a seat in one of the sleek, leather chairs. My heart was pounding in my chest. I had no idea what to expect. Was I really ready for this? Was I ready to step into the world of a man like Adrian Black? Just then, the elevator doors opened, and Adrian walked out, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his sharp features exuding an air of control and authority. He looked even more imposing in person than he did in my memories. His amber eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Mia," he said with a small smile, his voice deep and soothing. "I'm glad you came." He extended his hand, and I hesitated before shaking it. The moment our hands touched, I felt a strange jolt of electricity. It was subtle, but it made me freeze for a split second. I quickly pulled my hand back, trying to mask the reaction. Adrian didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't acknowledge it. "Come with me," he said, leading me to a private elevator. We stepped inside, and the doors closed with a soft chime. Adrian pushed a button, and the elevator ascended swiftly. As the building rose higher, I couldn't help but glance out the windows, seeing the city spread out beneath us. It was a view I had only ever dreamed of. Adrian, noticing my gaze, smiled again. "It's a different world up here, isn't it?" he said. "But we all have our own worlds, Mia. You've been living in yours. Now it's time to see mine." The elevator stopped, and the doors opened to reveal a luxurious penthouse office. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a breathtaking view of the city, and the room was furnished with dark wood and plush chairs, giving off an aura of power and sophistication. "This is where I work," Adrian said, walking toward the desk. "And it's where you'll work too, if you choose to accept my offer." I stood frozen for a moment, taking in the space. I had never seen anything like it. But before I could say anything, Adrian spoke again, his voice steady and calm. "I don't want you to think of this as just another job. This is an opportunity, Mia. An opportunity to become something more. To change your life." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "What do you mean?" I asked. Adrian turned to face me, his expression serious now. "I'm offering you a position within my company, but it's more than that. I'm offering you a chance to leave behind everything that has held you back and embrace something greater." My heart raced as the weight of his words hit me. This was no ordinary job offer. It was a turning point in my life. But could I trust him? Could I trust someone like him? I stood there, my heart pounding, as Adrian's words echoed in my mind. A chance to change my life. A chance to escape everything I had been struggling with for so long. The offer was more than I could have ever imagined, and yet, there was a nagging feeling deep inside me. What exactly was he asking of me? And what kind of world was I about to enter? Adrian seemed to notice my hesitation. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "I know this is overwhelming, Mia," he said, his voice low and soothing. "But this is your chance to take control of your destiny. No more working endless shifts, no more feeling invisible. You've already shown me that you have what it takes." I swallowed, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I had always been the type to just survive, to go through the motions without ever really living. Was this really the opportunity one had been waiting for? Was I brave enough to take it? Adrian's eyes held mine, waiting for an answer. "I need time to think," I finally whispered. He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But remember, opportunities like this don't come often. You deserve something more, Mia." and I'm offering it to you." The words hung in the air, and I felt a strange sense of urgency in his voice. He turned and walked toward his desk, the soft sound of his footsteps echoing in the large room. For a moment, I stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. I had come this far, and yet, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something unknown. Adrian's world was vast and powerful, and I couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to step into it. But was I ready to give up my old life, everything I had known, for the unknown? As I stood there, lost in thought, Adrian spoke again, his voice cutting through my uncertainty. "Mia, I know you're scared. I was too once. But sometimes, taking a leap of faith is the only way to truly change your life." His words were like a spark, igniting something inside me. I had spent so long being afraid of what could happen if I took risks, but maybe it was time to face those fears. Maybe it was time to take control of my future. "I'm ready," I said, the words coming out stronger than I expected. Adrian turned, his eyes lighting up with something unreadable. "Good. I'll have my assistant send over the details. But just so you know, Mia, this isn't a decision to take lightly. The world you're about to enter isn't for everyone." His words were a warning, but there was something in his voice that made me want to know more. "I understand," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not afraid." Adrian's smile was small but approving. "We'll see about that," he said with a hint of amusement. "But you've made the right choice. Welcome to the beginning of your new life." The room felt different now. It was as if the air had shifted, and I was no longer just a girl struggling to make ends meet. I was about to step into a world of power, wealth, and danger. And I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a choice. As I left Adrian's office and stepped out into the bright city streets, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation building inside me. This was it, the beginning of something new. But what would it look like? What would my life be like in the world of a vampire king? I didn't know, but for the first time, I felt ready to find out. I spent the next few days in a daze, unsure of what exactly I was walking into. Adrian had given me an opportunity that most people would kill for, but deep down, I was still struggling with doubt. Was I really ready to leave behind everything I knew? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the verge of something far bigger than I could understand. The details Adrian's assistant had sent over were clear enough. A new job, a new role, a new life. But there were things left unspoken, things I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. On the day of my first official meeting at Adrian's company, I found myself standing in front of a building that was nothing short of imposing. The skyscraper seemed to touch the clouds, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the sun in a way that almost made it glow. The air around me felt thick, charged with energy, as if the city itself recognized the power that resided within. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The lobby was grander than anything I had ever seen. Polished floors, walls lined with modern art, and an atmosphere that hummed with the promise of wealth and influence. I approached the receptionist, trying to keep my nerves in check. "I'm here to see Mr. Black," I said, my voice steady despite the fluttering in my chest. The receptionist glanced at me with a polite smile and nodded. "Right this way, miss," she said, gesturing toward an elevator. The elevator ride was silent, but it felt as though time itself had slowed. My heart raced as I mentally prepared myself for what was ahead. When the doors opened, I was met with a breathtaking view. Adrian's office was high up, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a sweeping panorama of the city. I stepped into the room, and there he was. Adrian, standing by his desk, looking as commanding and effortlessly powerful as ever. His eyes flickered up to meet mine, and for a moment, I felt the weight of his gaze. "Mia," he said, his voice warm, but with a hint of something deeper that I couldn't quite place. "I'm glad you could make it." I nodded, unsure of what to say. He motioned for me to sit, and I did. So, feeling like I was stepping into a world I couldn't fully comprehend. "I want to make something clear from the start," Adrian continued, his voice steady and confident. "This is not just a job. It's a chance for you to prove yourself. Not to me, but to yourself." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over me. "I know that what I'm offering you is more than just work. It's a lifestyle, a different way of living, one that isn't bound by the constraints most people face. I want you to understand that this isn't for everyone. It takes more than just ambition. It takes something else." He paused, his gaze steady. But I believe you have it, Mia. I've seen it in you from the moment we met. I felt my heart skip a beat. His words made me feel seen, in a way I hadn't experienced before. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You'll understand soon enough, he said with a cryptic smile. But for now, I want you to focus on what you can bring to the table. This world isn't like the one you've known. It's different, and I'm going to teach you how to navigate it. You won't be alone in this. His words were both reassuring and terrifying. I had no idea what kind of world I was stepping into, but I felt something inside me stir. A flicker of hope, mixed with a deep sense of fear. So what's the first step? I asked, my voice more confident than I felt. Adrian smiled, a glimmer of something predatory in his eyes. The first step is simple. You'll start by learning everything. Every detail, every nuance of the business. I'm not just handing you this opportunity, Mia. You have to earn it. But I'm confident you can do it. I see something in you that I haven't seen in others. The weight of his words was almost overwhelming. Was I really cut out for this? For this life? For this world? But as I looked into his eyes, I knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of something I couldn't walk away from. No matter how much I wanted to, no matter how much I feared what lay ahead, I couldn't turn back now. Adrian was right about one thing. This wasn't just a job. It was a life-changing opportunity. And whether I was ready or not, I had already taken the first step into his world. I spent the following weeks diving headfirst into this new world Adrian had offered me. Every day was a blur of meetings, training sessions, and overwhelming amounts of information. It was nothing like the waitressing I had done, nothing like the life I had known. The hours were long, but Adrian's presence was constant, guiding me, watching me, pushing me further than I thought I could go. There were days I questioned myself, wondering if I had made the right decision. But there were moments, too, when I caught a glimpse of what he had promised, the power, the freedom, the possibility of becoming something more. Yet, as much as I learned, as much as I adapted, something still lingered in the air. The tension between us, that pull I couldn't ignore, was growing stronger. I had heard the rumors about Adrian, about his ruthless ways and the dangerous world he came from, but it wasn't just his power that intrigued me. It was the way he seemed to see something in me that I hadn't seen in myself. But despite all that, I still couldn't shake the fear, the sense that I was in way over my head. One evening, as the sun set behind the towering skyscrapers outside his office, Adrian called me into his private study. I had been there a few times before, but each time, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the space, the richness, the darkness, and the sense that everything in that room had been carefully designed to command attention. He was standing by the large window when I entered, staring out at the city. His posture was relaxed, but there was something about him that made the room feel charged. Mia, he said, his voice breaking the silence. I stepped closer, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and apprehension. Yes, Adrian. He turned to face me, his amber eyes locked on mine, unreadable but intense. I need you to understand something, he said, his voice low and steady. This world I've brought you into, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not a world you can walk away from once you've entered. You're not the same person you were when you walked into this office for the first time. You're part of something bigger now. His words hit me like a wave, but they weren't unexpected. I had known this all along, but hearing it from him made it feel real. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I'm not sure I understand, I admitted. Adrian stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. What I mean is, Mia, you've seen the power that comes with this life. You've seen what it can do, how it can change people. But there's a cost. It's not just about the perks or the money. It's about loyalty, power, and control. My pulse quickened, and I took a step back, my mind racing. Was this what I had been walking into? The reality of it all felt like a punch to the gut. What are you saying? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Adrian's expression softened, but only slightly. I'm saying that if you want to be part of this, truly part of it, you need to make a choice. You can't have one foot in and one foot out. You need to decide where your loyalty lies. I felt the weight of his words settle deep within me. I had been on the edge of something, and now I realized that I was standing at the precipice. I had never been one to make decisions lightly, especially not ones that would change my life forever. But Adrian was right. I had already made my choice when I walked into his world. Now it was time to face the consequences of that decision. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady despite the uncertainty that still gripped me. Adrian's gaze softened, but there was something behind it. A mixture of approval and something else, something darker. Good. But remember, Mia, there's no turning back now. You've crossed a line. His words sent a shiver down my spine, but I knew deep down that there was no going back for me. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was a path I had chosen, and I would walk it, no matter where it led. As I left his office that evening, the city lights below seemed brighter, almost like they were calling to me. The life I had known was slipping away, but in its place, something new was beginning to take shape. Something powerful, something dangerous, something that would change me forever. And no matter how afraid I was, I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to embrace it. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of new experiences. Adrian's world was everything I had imagined and more. The power, the luxury, the sense of being part of something bigger than myself. It was intoxicating. Every day, I found myself learning more about the world Adrian had introduced me to, and yet, I felt a growing unease. Something about the life I was stepping into didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't bring myself to walk away. It was too late for that. The further I went, the deeper I became entangled in his world. I was no longer just a waitress struggling to get by. I was someone important now, someone who had the chance to make a real difference. But at what cost? The power, the money, it all seemed so alluring, but there was a dark undertone I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the grandeur of Adrian's life that was unsettling, it was the secrets. There were whispers in the corridors, subtle looks exchanged between employees, and conversations that stopped the moment I entered a room. I knew there was more to this world than what I had been shown, and I was beginning to realize that I might not be prepared for what lay ahead. One afternoon, I found myself alone in Adrian's office, going over some files he had asked me to review. The door opened, and I looked up, surprised to see Adrian standing in the doorway. His usual confident demeanor was absent. He looked more tense than usual, as if something weighed heavily on his mind. "Mia," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I need to talk to you." My heart skipped a beat. The seriousness in his voice sent a wave of anxiety through me. "Of course, Adrian. What's going on?" He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him, his gaze never leaving mine. "There's something you need to understand," he began, his tone low and serious. "The position I've offered you, it's not just about business. It's about loyalty. You're becoming a part of something that's bigger than both of us, something that has its own set of rules." I frowned, trying to read his expression. There was something in his eyes that I couldn't quite place. Was he warning me? What kind of rules? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Adrian walked over to the window and gazed out at the city below. "The kind that aren't always easy to follow," he said, his voice distant. "This world isn't like anything you've experienced. It's a world of power, of influence, and sometimes it requires sacrifices." My stomach churned. Sacrifices? What did he mean by that? Sacrifices? I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "What kind of sacrifices?" Adrian turned to face me, his eyes filled with an intensity one hadn't seen before. "The kind where you have to choose between your morals and your loyalty," he said, his voice steady but filled with an undeniable weight. "There are things in this world that aren't always black and white, Mia. There are situations where you'll have to make tough decisions. Decisions that could affect not only your future, but the future of everyone around you." I felt a chill run down my spine. I wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't prepared for the darkness that seemed to follow Adrian, lurking just beneath the surface of his perfect world. But I couldn't look away. I had come this far, and now there was no turning back. "I need to know you're ready for that," Adrian continued, his gaze unwavering. "I need to know that when the time comes, you'll stand by my side, no matter what." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had no idea what kind of future lay ahead, but it was clear now that I was being asked to make a choice. A choice that would define everything. "I'm ready," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was telling the truth. Adrian's expression softened for a moment, but it quickly turned serious again. "You'll have to prove it," he said, his voice firm. "And when you do, there will be no turning back. Your loyalty will be tested, Mia, and I need you to be prepared for what that means." I nodded, unsure of what I was agreeing to, but there was a part of me that knew, deep down, that this was the point of no return. Adrian had already made his choice. Now, it was my turn to decide whether I could live with the consequences. I left his office that day with a heavy heart, but a part of me felt a strange sense of clarity. I had entered Adrian's world willingly, but now, I realized, I wasn't just a spectator. I was a participant, and whether I was ready or not, the game had already begun. I woke up the next morning with a strange sense of unease settling over me. Adrian's words from the night before echoed in my mind, and I found myself questioning everything once again. His world was filled with power, wealth, and danger, and I was already in too deep to back out. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was already entangled in this web. The choice I had made was irreversible, and now, I had to live with it. I had come to Adrian's world seeking something more, but I was starting to understand that I might not be ready for what came with it. I had seen glimpses of the darkness that lay behind the glamour and elegance. I had seen the way people looked at me, the subtle shifts in the atmosphere when I entered a room. I was a part of something bigger now, but I didn't know if I could handle it. That morning, Adrian called me into his office again. This time, he wasn't alone. There was a man with him, someone I hadn't seen before. He was tall, with sharp features and dark eyes that seemed to study me like I was a puzzle he was trying to figure out. "Mia," Adrian said, his voice calm but firm. "This is Victor. He's one of my most trusted associates." Victor gave me a polite nod, but there was something cold in his gaze that made me uncomfortable. "Victor," Adrian continued, "Mia is going to be working closely with you from now on. I trust you'll show her the ropes." Victor's smile was tight, almost forced. "Of course, Mr. Black," he said. "I'll make sure she gets the training she needs." I nodded, trying to keep my composure. Adrian's trust in me was an honor, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the days passed, I found myself shadowing Victor, learning the ins and outs of Adrian's business. The work was intense, and the stakes were high. I could feel the weight of the decisions we were making, and each one seemed to carry more consequences than the last. But it wasn't just the work that had me on edge. It was the way Victor looked at me, the way he observed me with a curiosity that bordered on unsettling. Every time we crossed paths, I could feel his gaze on me, lingering a moment too long. I had no doubt that he was trying to figure me out, just like Adrian had. But unlike Adrian, there was something colder, more calculating in Victor's eyes. One evening, after a particularly intense meeting, I found myself alone in the office, going over some files. I was still processing everything I had learned that day when the door opened, and Victor stepped in. He didn't knock, just entered, his footsteps silent as he approached my desk. "Mia," he said, his voice smooth but with an edge to it. "We need to talk." I glanced up at him, trying to maintain my calm. "About what?" I asked, my voice steady, though I could feel my heart rate picking up. "About you," he replied, his tone low, almost predatory. "About how you're fitting into Adrian's world." I frowned, feeling a chill run down my spine. "I'm just doing my job," I said, trying to brush off the tension in the air. "That's not what I meant," Victor said, stepping closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "You're not just doing a job, Mia. You're becoming a part of something much bigger, and you need to understand what that means." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "I do understand," I said, trying to sound confident. "I'm here to help. I'm here to learn." Victor smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "You think that's enough? You think you can just waltz into this world and not have to prove yourself?" His voice dropped, becoming more intense. "This world doesn't take kindly to people who don't know where they stand. You need to make a choice, Mia, a real choice." My heart was pounding now. "What choice?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Victor leaned in, his face inches from mine. "You need to decide who you really are. Are you just a girl from the streets who got lucky? Or are you someone who can stand beside Adrian? Someone who can be trusted with everything that comes with this world?" His words hit me hard, and for a moment I was speechless. I hadn't realized until now just how much was at stake. I wasn't just learning the business. I was being tested, pushed to my limits, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for the pressure. "I can handle it," I said, forcing the words out despite the fear building in my chest. Victor's smile widened, and he straightened up. "We'll see about that," he said, his voice cold. "Just remember, Mia, in this world, loyalty is everything. If you don't have that, you have nothing." With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The weight of his words lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking on a razor's edge. One wrong move, one moment of doubt, and everything could come crashing down. But as I sat there, staring at the papers in front of me, I realized something. I had already made my choice. I had already crossed the line. Now, it was time to see if I could survive in Adrian's world. And if I couldn't, I knew there would be no turning back. I stood at the edge of Adrian's world, feeling the weight of the choices I had made and the path I was on. The fear that had been gnawing at me for days had only intensified. Victor's words rang in my ears. In this world, loyalty is everything. It was clear now. I wasn't just working for Adrian. I was becoming part of something far more dangerous. Every action, every decision I made would have consequences, and I was starting to realize that I wasn't prepared for all that came with this life. As the days passed, I found myself drifting deeper into the fold. Adrian's world wasn't just about business. It was about power, control, and keeping secrets. There was an unspoken understanding among the people around me. Trust no one, and always watch your back. But I wasn't sure I was cut out for this kind of world. The tension between us, Adrian and I, grew with each passing day. There was an undeniable attraction, a magnetic pull, but there were also barriers that kept us apart. He was in a world I could never truly belong to, and I was beginning to see that he was a man who lived by a different set of rules. I had to face the truth. I was getting in too deep, and I had no idea how to escape. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I found myself alone in the office, going over some reports. I had been up since early morning, but the overwhelming feeling that I had missed something important, kept me from leaving. Just as I thought I could finally relax, the door opened. Adrian stepped inside, his presence filling the room. There was a look in his eyes that I had never seen before. Something serious, something heavy. "Mia," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he walked over to my desk, leaning against it with a calm, almost detached expression. "This isn't an easy conversation," he started, his gaze intense. "I've been watching you, Mia. I've been watching how you've handled everything, how you've adapted." I froze. "What are you trying to say?" My voice was a mix of confusion and fear. "You're not like everyone else," Adrian said, his voice softer now, almost as if he were talking to himself. "But there's a price to be paid for standing out in this world. People who stand out are often the first to be targeted." My stomach twisted. "Targeted by who?" I asked, my voice trembling. Adrian stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "There are others who don't want to see you succeed," he said quietly. "People who are watching. People who will do whatever it takes to bring you down." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Is this why you brought me here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "To protect me?" Adrian's gaze hardened. "I didn't bring you here to protect you," he said, his voice low and steady. "I brought you here to make you strong enough to protect yourself." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. For the first time, I truly understood the gravity of what I had gotten myself into. Adrian's world was dangerous, and I was in the middle of it. I wasn't just another employee. I wasn't just a pawn in a game. I was part of something far bigger, and I had no idea how deep it went. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear churning inside me. Adrian's lips curled into a small smile, but it wasn't the kind of smile I had seen before. It was knowing, almost like he had been expecting this moment. "You'll start by learning the truth about this world," he said, his voice low but commanding. "And then, you'll make a choice. A choice that will define everything." I felt a surge of uncertainty wash over me. But I had already crossed a line. There was no turning back now. "What kind of choice?" I asked, feeling my pulse quicken. Adrian looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You'll know when the time comes," he said. "But for now, you need to be prepared for anything. This world isn't what it seems, and you need to be ready for what's to come." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I didn't know what was ahead, but I knew I had already made the decision to stay. The question now was whether I was strong enough to face whatever came next. As Adrian turned to leave, his words lingered in the air. "Remember, Mia," he said without looking back, "loyalty is everything. Without it, you have nothing." His words echoed in my mind as I stood there, alone in the dimly lit office. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure of whether to take the final step or turn back. But I knew deep down that there was no turning back now. I had already chosen this path, and the only way forward was through the storm. I couldn't sleep that night. Adrian's words kept replaying in my mind, and with each turn, I felt the weight of what I had signed up for. Loyalty is everything. I could still hear his voice, calm but full of an unspoken warning. I had crossed a line, stepped into a world I barely understood, and now there was no turning back. I had spent years struggling to make ends meet, doing everything I could to survive. But now, in this world of power and danger, I felt small and insignificant. The truth was, I wasn't ready. But then again, when was I ever ready for anything? I had always reacted to the circumstances I found myself in, never thinking about the bigger picture, never planning for the future. But now, the stakes were higher, and I had no choice but to face the consequences of my decisions. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, trying to shake the lingering doubt that had settled in my chest. I had a new role to play, and I needed to prove myself. Adrian had promised me a chance to grow, to become something more than just a waitress, but now I was beginning to see that it wasn't going to be as easy as he made it sound. The people around me were not what they seemed. They were all playing their own games, hiding behind masks of politeness and professionalism. I had to learn how to navigate through all the deception and manipulation without losing myself in the process. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could. I spent the day in a haze of meetings and paperwork, trying to keep up with the pace. Each moment felt like a test, each decision a crucial step toward either success or failure. By the time I left the office, the weight of the day had taken its toll on me. I was exhausted, mentally and physically. But as I walked toward the elevator, I was stopped by a voice I knew too well. Mia. It was Victor. He stood by the elevator, his dark eyes fixed on me. There was an intensity to his gaze that sent a shiver down my spine. I need to talk to you, he said, his tone low, almost threatening. I didn't want to engage with him, but I didn't have a choice. What is it? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Victor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You've been doing well, Mia, he said, stepping closer. But I need to see if you can handle more than just the paperwork. I need to see if you're really cut out for this. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You'll see, he said cryptically, his gaze never leaving mine. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folder, handing it to me. Take this to Adrian, he said. He's expecting it. I hesitated for a moment, but then took the folder from him. What's in it? I asked, already dreading the answer. That's for you to find out, he said, his voice cold. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with the folder in my hand, wondering what I had just gotten myself into. When I entered Adrian's office, he was standing by the window, as usual, his back to me. I approached cautiously, trying to steady my breath. You've got the report? He asked without turning around. Yes, I said, handing him the folder. He took it from me without a word and opened it, scanning the contents quickly. I watched him, trying to gauge his reaction, but his expression remained unreadable. Victor told me to give it to you, I said. Adrian's eyes flickered toward me for a moment, then back to the papers in front of him. Victor, he muttered, almost to himself. He likes to play his games. There was a strange tension in the air, a sense of something looming just beneath the surface. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. What's going on? I asked, unable to hold back any longer. Adrian paused, his fingers still on the papers, but he didn't look at me. This is bigger than you think, Mia, he said, his voice low, almost tired. There are forces at work here that you don't fully understand. You're a part of this now, and there's no turning back. I swallowed hard. I know, I said, though I wasn't sure if I did know. I wasn't sure if I understood anything anymore. Adrian turned to face me, his gaze piercing. You're proving yourself, Mia. But there's still more to be done. There are things you need to learn, and I'm not sure if you're ready for all of it. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I had been living in fear of this moment, of realizing that I wasn't ready, that I wasn't cut out for this life. But the truth was, I was already too far gone. I had made my choice, and now, I had to live with it. What do I need to do? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Adrian took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. You need to decide where your loyalty lies, Mia. Who do you trust? And who are you willing to betray? The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. Loyalty. Betrayal. These were the choices I was being forced to make, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for the consequences. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. I walked out of Adrian's office that day with a heavy heart, his words still ringing in my ears. Who do you trust? And who are you willing to betray? His question echoed in my mind like a warning, a constant reminder that the decisions I would make moving forward would have consequences that I might not be able to control. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. I couldn't turn back now. I had already made my choice, and now I had to live with it. The next few days were a blur. Every step I took in Adrian's world felt like a test. The people around me, his associates, the employees, none of them seemed to have the same fears or doubts I did. They were all so sure of their place, so confident in their roles. But I wasn't. I felt like an outsider, always one step behind, struggling to keep up. But then there were moments when I felt like I was actually starting to understand. The power that Adrian wielded, the way he commanded respect without even trying, was something I began to crave. It wasn't just the wealth or the position that came with it, it was the control. The control over everything and everyone. It was a world where loyalty was paramount, and betrayal could cost you everything. And yet, as much as I tried to adapt, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that there were eyes on me, waiting for me to slip up. One afternoon, I found myself in the conference room, preparing for another meeting with Adrian and a few of his closest associates. I had been given more responsibilities recently, and I was determined to prove myself. But the tension in the room was palpable, and it wasn't just the business deals being discussed. It was something else, something darker. As I sat there, going over the notes in front of me, I felt a presence in the room. I glanced up and met Victor's eyes. He was standing in the corner, his gaze sharp and calculating. There was something in the way he looked at me that made my stomach turn. I couldn't help but feel like he was always waiting for me to make a mistake. He had made it clear from the beginning that he didn't trust me, and that feeling had never gone away. Adrian, on the other hand, seemed distant today. His focus was entirely on the matter at hand, his face unreadable. But there was something in his silence that made me uneasy. After a few moments, Adrian stood up, his presence commanding the attention of the room. Mia, he said, his voice steady. You've been doing well, but you need to understand something. This is more than just business. It's about loyalty, trust, and power. If you want to stay here, you need to show that you understand that. I looked up at him, my heart pounding. I do, I said, trying to sound confident. I understand. Adrian's gaze softened, but there was still something cold about it. Good. But remember, Mia, he continued, his voice low and intense. Loyalty is everything. It's not just about doing your job. It's about making the right choices. And sometimes, those choices won't be easy. You'll have to decide who you stand with and who you stand against. And when that time comes, you can't hesitate. His words sent a chill down my spine. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, the unspoken pressure building in the room. I had to make the right choices. I had to be loyal. But to whom? And at what cost? The meeting dragged on after that, but I couldn't focus. My mind was consumed with thoughts of loyalty, trust, and betrayal. Who was I really working for? Adrian? Or was I just a pawn in a game I didn't understand? As the meeting ended and the others filtered out, I was left alone with Adrian. He walked over to me, his expression unreadable. I'm trusting you with something important, Mia, he said quietly, his voice low. I need to know that you won't let me down. I met his gaze, trying to read him, but it was impossible. You won't regret it, I said, even though I wasn't sure if that was true. Adrian's lips twitched into a small smile. I hope not, he replied. But the world we live in doesn't give second chances. The words hit me like a punch, and I realized that this was it. There was no going back. I was already in too deep. But as much as I wanted to walk away, a part of me knew that I wouldn't. I had chosen this life, and now I had to live with the consequences. As I left the conference room, the weight of Adrian's words still hung heavy on me. The choices ahead would be difficult, and I would have to make them on my own. But one thing was certain, loyalty was the key, and I had to decide whose side I was on. The thought of betraying him, of betraying anyone, made my stomach turn. But I knew deep down that in this world, trust could be as dangerous as betrayal. And the line between the two was razor thin. I had spent weeks trying to adjust to this new life, trying to understand Adrian's world and what role I played in it. The more I learned, the more complicated it became. The stakes were higher than I ever imagined, and every move I made seemed to have consequences I couldn't fully grasp. The tension in the air was palpable, and I had begun to understand that this was no ordinary business. Adrian's world was a dangerous one, filled with shifting alliances, whispered secrets, and threats that could destroy everything I had worked for. It wasn't just about loyalty anymore. It was about survival. I had been doing my best to keep up, but it wasn't enough. There was always more to learn, more to prove, and the pressure was starting to weigh on me. My every action was being watched, and I had to stay one step ahead, or I would fall behind. But as much as I tried to stay focused, I couldn't escape the pull of Adrian's presence. There was something magnetic about him, something that made it impossible for me to ignore him, even when I wanted to. We had developed an unspoken connection, a tension that neither of us seemed willing to address. But that all changed the night of the gala. It was one of the most important events of the year, an evening where Adrian's company showcased its power and influence to the world. I had been tasked with helping prepare for the event, but I knew that the true purpose of the gala was something far more significant. It wasn't just about business, it was a statement, a show of strength. As the evening approached, I found myself in the grand ballroom, surrounded by the wealthiest and most powerful people in the city. The lights glittered above, and the air was thick with the hum of conversation and clinking glasses. I moved through the crowd, doing my job, making sure everything was in place, but my eyes were constantly drawn to Adrian. He stood at the center of it all, commanding the room with his mere presence. He was everything I had ever dreamed of, powerful, confident, and untouchable. But tonight, he seemed different. There was an edge to him, something that made him look even more dangerous than usual. As the night wore on, the tension in the room grew. The conversations around me became more intense, more calculated. People were watching, waiting for something. And then, just as I had almost convinced myself that everything was under control, the moment came. I saw a man enter the room, a face I didn't recognize. His presence was unnerving, and I could feel the shift in the atmosphere as soon as he stepped through the door. He was tall, with dark hair and cold eyes, and he moved with a purpose, as if he was a part of this world but not fully accepted by it. I watched as he made his way toward Adrian, who was standing at the center of the room, his back to me. My heart skipped a beat. I could sense that something was about to happen. The man spoke to Adrian, his voice low and calm, but I could see the subtle tension in Adrian's posture, the way his jaw tightened as he listened. The conversation was short, but the impact was immediate. The room seemed to hold its breath as Adrian nodded, his face expressionless. I watched as the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. But something about the interaction left a mark on me. Adrian's usual composure had cracked, just for a moment, and I knew it wasn't just about the business. There was something personal there. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just a world of power and influence. It was a world of constant danger. Adrian was no longer just the man who had given me a chance. He was the leader of a world that demanded loyalty and respect, and anyone who failed to meet those demands was swiftly dealt with. I could see the weight of it on him. He was always in control, always calculating, always watching. And I was no longer just a bystander. I had been pulled into his world, and there was no escaping it. As the night came to a close and the guests began to leave, I found myself standing alone in the empty ballroom, the echoes of the evening still reverberating in my mind. Adrian had already left, and I knew I would see him again soon. But for now, I was left with the realization that I was in deeper than I had ever imagined. The choices I had made, the decisions I had yet to make, they would all shape my future in ways I couldn't yet understand. The world I had entered was dark, dangerous, and filled with secrets. But there was no turning back. I had already crossed the line, and now, I had to live with the consequences. I had spent so much time trying to fit in, trying to find my place in Adrian's world, but now I understood that I wasn't meant to just fit in. I was meant to become a part of it, to adapt in ways I hadn't anticipated. The gala had been the final moment of realization for me, the culmination of everything I had experienced since stepping into this world. As I walked through the quiet halls of the building the next morning, my mind was still racing. The event had shaken me, made me see that I wasn't just here to help Adrian with his business. I was here to prove myself, to stand by him, and to make decisions that could affect more than just my future. I was in the thick of it now. There was no easy way out, no simple path to take. The truth that had been hidden in plain sight was now fully revealed. Loyalty and power were the cornerstones of this world, and I had to choose where my loyalty lay. In those days after the gala, I found myself questioning everything. Adrian had made his expectations clear. He had given me a chance to prove myself, but now the stakes were higher than ever. I couldn't afford to make mistakes. Every decision I made from here on out would matter. And the tension between us, that magnetic pull I had been feeling all this time, was only growing stronger. But something had changed. I had changed. And so had Adrian. I began to realize that the dynamic between us wasn't just about work. It was about something deeper, something more complicated. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was someone Adrian depended on, and that meant more than I was willing to admit. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Adrian called me to his office. He was standing by the window, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a subtle intensity. As I walked in, I could feel the weight of his gaze on me. There was something different in the air. "Mia," he said, his voice steady but with a quiet urgency. "We need to talk." I nodded, my heart racing as I took a step closer. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my composure. He turned toward me, his expression unreadable. "There's something important happening," he said, his voice low. "Something you need to be prepared for." I felt a chill run through me. I had no idea what he was referring to, but the way he said it made it clear that this was more than just business. "What do you mean?" I asked, a knot tightening in my stomach. "There are forces at play in this world that you don't fully understand yet," Adrian said, his eyes meeting mine. "But you need to understand this now. The loyalty you've shown me, the trust you've built, those things mean everything. But there's one thing you need to remember. In this world, loyalty isn't just a choice. It's a weapon, and it can be used against you." His words were like a punch to the gut. I had known that loyalty meant everything, but I had never considered it as a weapon. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Adrian stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "You need to be ready," he said, his voice quiet but commanding. "Things are going to get more complicated from here. There are people who want to bring us down, people who think they can control us. And I need to know that. When the time comes, you will stand by me. No hesitation. No doubt." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. I had been in this world long enough to know that there were risks, but hearing Adrian's words made me realize just how dangerous this really was. I wasn't just in a business venture. I was in a battle for power, for control, and for survival. "I'm with you," I said, my voice steady, though the fear inside me was growing. Adrian's eyes softened slightly, but the intensity never left. "Good," he said, "because the moment you step into this world, there's no going back." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. The weight of his words was sinking in, and I realized that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The choices I made now would determine everything. "I won't let you down," I said, even though I wasn't sure I could fully live up to his expectations. Adrian didn't say anything more. He simply turned and walked back toward the window, leaving me standing there, alone with my thoughts. The room felt colder now, and I could feel the reality of the situation pressing in on me. This was it. There was no turning back. I was already deep in this world, and the only thing left to do was survive it. As I left his office, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to escalate. The danger was real, and I had no idea how it would all unfold. But one thing was clear, I had made my choice. And now, I had to live with the consequences. Discover a gripping tale filled with intrigue, power, and the dark allure of vampire stories. This thrilling narrative delves into the world of a young woman who finds herself caught in a web of power and loyalty, all under the watchful eye of a dangerous vampire king. As she navigates this treacherous world, the choices she makes will determine her fate. Vampire stories often explore the complexity of human emotions, and this one is no different, filled with suspense, betrayal, and the constant struggle between light and dark. The protagonist's journey into the unknown world of vampires is both compelling and chilling, offering a fresh take on the timeless theme of power struggles within the supernatural realm. With every decision, the stakes grow higher, and the line between loyalty and betrayal becomes more blurred. Vampire stories are known for their intense atmosphere, and this one keeps readers on edge, eager to see how the protagonist will navigate the dangerous path ahead. As the story unfolds, the protagonist finds herself questioning her place in a world she can no longer ignore. What happens next in this tale of darkness and desire will leave you hooked, as the world of vampires reveals its darker secrets. If you love stories filled with twists, loyalty tests, and a touch of romance, this will be one of the best vampire stories you've ever encountered.